It's the secrecy that inhibits the success and freedom and autonomy of every family member. And it is the secrecy that inhibits the closeness and the communication within the family. It's not the wealth.
Welcome to Visionary Advisor. I'm your host, Alex Kirby, founder of Total Family. When it comes to family dynamics and governance, not all wealth firms are created equal. And in this episode, you're going to hear from one of the best. Luke Jernagan is the managing director for family learning at Matter Family Office in St. Louis. Luke and I talk about his white paper, The Power of Effective Transparency, the opportunity costs of clients keeping secrets, and going through real life scenarios that advisors might face with their clients. It's time to hear from Luke Jernagan. Luke Jernagan of Matter Family Office, Managing Director of Family Learning. Welcome to Visionary Advisor. We know each other from the Ultra High Net Worth Institute.
We do. And I'm really glad to be on your podcast and always glad for the conversation.
Yeah. And we're here because you wrote a white paper called The Power of Effective Transparency. What made you want to write something like this?
At Matter, we're thinking about ways to help our clients, but also contribute to our industry and to be thought partners with our clients and with a lot of our peers. We thought this was worth putting out there because what we've learned to be a universal truth in our experience is that the families that practice transparency and communicate well together and are open to talking to each other about money, about family wealth, about business operation, and the families that have no secrets tend to be the ones that function very well for generations.
Matter certainly has a wonderful brand and reputation. Not every firm has the resources to have someone like yourself on staff who gets to work with all these different family members, right? But I think the thing that I said to you in advance was, I feel like these ideas that you're talking about, although you're telling stories in the ultra high net worth space, they apply to, a family with $5 million or a family with $20 million. So do you agree with that there's lessons in here because there could be some advisors listening and they're like, well, I don't have any $100 million clients. So is this stuff that we're about to talk about applicable to a client with $5 or $10 million too?
Yeah, I think it's universal. Most days I come home from work and I'm chatting with my wife about what I'm doing and things we're writing about and studying and conversations with families. And she says, this isn't just for wealthy people. Like this applies to everybody.
Yeah, there's very human elements in what you're talking about. And I think if I had to summarize it, it's communication and collaboration, right?
Yeah, right. I would say communication and trust.
And trust.
And really, communication and trust create a flywheel. Like often once you have a relationship of deep trust, then you can communicate openly. And when you learn to communicate openly, you begin to trust each other more deeply.
Yeah. And we'll put the link to this on there, for people to find it so they can read it. But you start off by saying, why is transparency so hard? So maybe I have a couple of things I want to get into, but I think that's just a great place to start. Why is this even a challenge to build the trust and communication around some of these topics?
I think a lot of our peers have written about this, but for generations, money has been a taboo topic that people are afraid to talk about. And I think that what has changed in the last few years that Dennis Jaffe and Jim Grubman have talked about with Wealth 3.0 is that families now have more tools to learn how to communicate openly with each other. Mm-hmm. I think what I find is, there are organizations like Young Presidents Organization, Tugboat Institute that just didn't exist, 30 or 40 years ago in the same way that they do now, where people with generational businesses or generational wealth can come together with other peers to share ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that terrific organizations like those are beginning to normalize collaboration and openness. And families are beginning to think about how they can be more transparent with each other because they see the value in it.
Yeah.
And I think what we try to do here at Matter is really create thoughtful structures around giving families the tools to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think that the reason that so many families don't or haven't is grounded in fear. Um, Once we share this information, it can't be unshared. I don't want to share it too early because my kids may be too young to understand the idea of privacy.
Yeah.
I don't want them telling their friends about it. I don't want to screw them up. I don't want to make their drive in life evaporate. So there's a whole list of reasons that families are afraid to be transparent.
How much of this is just difficult conversations in general? Because I feel like money is what gets brought up all the time in our space. Families struggle to talk about money, but families struggle with conflict of all sorts. They struggle with, I don't know, a single parent that looks forward to the birds and the bees conversation. So, like, is it just difficult topics in general that we're talking about here? Or is it something specific about money that you think makes this different in some way?
I think that there are topics that are weightier,
Yeah.
right? And they're different in every family. But yes, I think, money and wealth is a weighty topic
Yeah.
because it gets into identity, it gets into ability. There are a lot of things that could be connected to it, even if that's not our original intention.
I feel like there's lessons in what you're saying that pertain to topics broader than money. So I want to jump into it because I do think money, sex, death, none of them are fun to talk about, but your approach is sort of like you allude to this, like when you're majoring in something in college, you
Mhm.
have kind of prerequisites and all the way through. And if we lean on like what Jay Hughes has said about some of this related to money specifically, the idea of some people have more than enough, some people have enough, and some people don't have enough as a starting point for the conversation. And so I feel like for all these tough topics, you can use some of these ideas that you're talking about. How you talk to a 6-year-old about death is going to be different than how you talk to a 26-year-old about death, right? But I still think like some of the things that you're saying around just open building trust, you don't want what you're telling them when they're 6 to betray their trust. You can still be honest and transparent and build trust without telling them, every single thing that on the topic, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair. Well, and the other thing is,
You can say it's not fair too, because I know I'm stretching on death and sex related to this topic, but I know families are struggling with tons of different. This isn't the only topic that is difficult for them. That's all.
that's right. So on the emotional side of it, you could say that, yes, you would talk about one subject with a 6-year-old very differently than you would a 26-year-old. But on the technical side of it, what we're talking about when families are talking about wealth, they're typically talking about how it is going to be shared and how it is governed.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of technical expertise that goes into that. So going to the college, the curriculum example, you can say anything in life that requires skill, you don't just throw all the data at somebody on day one and tell them to figure it out. Like
Right.
you've got to build the skill to be really competent in the field. And the same is true here. So when we talk about transparency with families, we're also talking about the skills that parents and kids need to have to be able to manage family wealth effectively.
Yeah. Okay. I think one of the things that we both agree on is the stage based approach that we're talking about, and that telling heirs nothing, secrecy, deliberate secrecy is a bad idea. Do you agree with that and why?
I do, because they're going to find out at some point.
Mhm.
And I believe that what every family wants is for all the elements of their family wealth, whether it's the financial capital, the social capital, the intellectual capital, etc. They want their wealth to support and enhance the life of every individual in the family.
Yeah.
That is the goal. And being secretive about that, it's the secrecy that inhibits the success and freedom and autonomy of every family member. And it is the secrecy that inhibits the closeness and the communication within the family. It's not the wealth. So you have this tool that could give so much opportunity and an enhancement to a family, but it's because of the way in which it is either shared or held back that allows that to be a benefit.
So you made the point, kids know more than you think, right? The internet exists. So, and we've heard that from lots of clients. We just have to acknowledge that in the time that we're living in, that you can Google someone and get a general sense of, if they're an executive in a company or affiliated with a, family owned business or whatever, so that these young people and the members of the family are not totally unaware. The other thing and I agree that the secrecy and all this stuff like breeds distrust in it. So I think all that is true. One of the things I love that you said in your paper is, when it comes to family wealth, many parents clam up. They wait far too long to be transparent with their children about their wealth and miss the opportunity to experience meaningful collaboration and shared leadership. I loved that because you're talking about opportunity cost of having this thing that you can work on and learn and grow with your kids. You're missing that collaboration. I love that.
Yeah, and it matter. Family culture and learning is a core part of our proposition with families. It's not a concierge service that is added on. It is a core element to how we serve families. What that means is the families that tend to be attracted to matter are the ones that are attracted to us because we offer that.
Right.
And a
It's part
lot
of
of
your branding, it's part of your story, it's, the referrals and everything you guys have done.
exactly. And in the fee that they're paying, it is already included. So they're only coming to us because they want the service that is part of that.
Yeah.
It tends to also mean that families really want to be transparent. They want to collaborate, but they need help. They need somebody to show them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we have found. And we've learned something from all of those families.
When you say it's a stage process, do you think are there stages that you have defined over time? Do you think about kids in college, or do you think pre-college or adults, or what are the stages? If I'm a wealth advisor and I have clients with, kids at various ages throughout, like, what are there stages that we should be thinking about?
That's a great question. And we have spent a lot of time talking about that. So we have identified a series of stages that are loosely based on age.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is that often families will come to us where the senior generation might be in their 70s or 80s, and their children are adult professionals, and they have not yet figured out how to talk with them
Sure.
about the wealth.
Yeah, sometimes like they'll be referencing the kids and the kids will
The
be,
kids are 50.
55. Yeah.
Right. So I try to be really careful in not using the word kids, but even adult children, like to say children, like that still has a connotation.
Right, right,
So then I
right.
try to get really clear and to talk about sons and daughters, but everything, is imperfect.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, but all of that being said, that giant caveat, I would say more often than not, families know that they want to share assets with the next generation years or decades before those assets are shared. Often families will set up a trust for that next generation, and it could be significant. It could be tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So when we are working with families, when When the next generation is young enough, we try to create even like a 10 to 20-year timetable.
Okay.
So let's say the kids are in high school, so they're still kids. We might know that when these kids are 25 years old or 30 years old or 35 years old, they're going to receive access to a significant trust. So what we will do is we'll work with the family, and this is the technical side. We'll work with the family to set up smaller trusts along the way. So it could be that when they go to college, they get a trust with $25,000. But what that gives them is access to quarterly statements that come from their family office,
Yeah.
a meeting book. They get introduced to the family's wealth advisors. They might come into the office once a year. And part of that is like just getting the rhythm and beginning to see what this place is like, and also this feeling of control
Hmm.
and responsibility. It's been really interesting. We've done this with families, and the parents are convinced that as soon as the kids get the $25,000, like they're going to go to Vegas, on spring break and it's gone.
Yeah. And they do. No,
They
I'm
don't.
just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
They tend to really hold on to that money. They
Yeah.
really like once they've come to, or once they've gotten 2 or 3 quarterly meeting books and they see the amount going up,
Right.
they get excited by that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done that. Maybe the next step is they graduate from college and get a trust with a few $100,000 in it. And then that gives them like a little more comfort, a little more responsibility. Maybe that's the point where they set up a family investment committee with the parents and the advisors, where they get together and they begin to talk about different strategies or opportunities. And all of this leads up to what we call a trust reveal. And this could be when, the larger trust is the access to that trust is shared with the next gen. So before that, we will ask the parents, what are the skills and competencies you need to see in your kids to trust that they will manage these assets really well and that it will be a value add to their life and not the opposite? Then we might go to the kids and say, you may have noticed your family has some wealth. You've received access to some smaller trusts. There are bigger ones coming. What are the skills and competencies you need from your parents
Yeah.
to be able to trust them and be able to talk openly? If there's an outside trustee involved, we would go to the trustee and ask the same question. What do you need from either side?
Yeah.
So when the trust reveal comes, often the parents will want us to facilitate this meeting. Sometimes they might even say, would you guys just tell our kids about the money? We never do that. What we would rather do is we spend a lot of time with the parents prepping them so that they facilitate this trust reveal meeting. And they share things like the history of the wealth. That's especially important if it's, generational.
Yep.
They write down lessons they've learned along the way, challenges that they've had, the hopes that they have for their kids. And the most important thing that we help them to voice is they trust their kids to manage these assets well, and they trust their kids to make the right decisions. So when that meeting comes together, it is the parent facilitating it with the advisor in the room,
Yeah.
but it's the parent telling their kids all of these things about the wealth, where it's come from, what its purpose is, what they want it to do for their kids, and also rules of the road.
Yeah.
So what it can be used for, what it can't be used for. But talking about the opportunity cost, the opportunity that comes out of the parents having this conversation with their kids
Right.
is profound,
Yeah.
because it's the parents and their kids building this shared culture together around, and the wealth is just the tool to do it. The advisor then becomes the trusted thought partner in the room who helps to facilitate what the family is creating on their own.
Yeah. I want to go back to the parents for a second, and then we can round it out with give you a couple scenarios that a lot of advisors probably hear and see what your answers are. But You talked about growth mindset for the family leaders. And I think as a leader of a family, sometimes you feel like you have to have it all figured out. Um, or sometimes we hear that I'm not the problem. It's the other people are the problem. And so if maybe you're a family leader even listening to this, why is that growth mindset so important for parents willing to take on a conversation like this?
I think it's so important because you have to be willing to learn from your kids.
What does that mean?
It means not saying, I have all the answers. I'm giving them this money. They've got to figure it out.
Right.
Or I'm going to set the parameter that they have to fall into. Lots of families operate that way. And when the parents operate that way, the kids are much more likely to say, I'm opting out.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we live in New York, I'm moving to Seattle,
Sure.
I'll see you guys at Christmas and maybe the 4th of July, and otherwise I'm out.
Right. Right.
Whereas if you create this environment where you're willing to learn from your kids and like think about what their interest is and what they bring to this and ideas that they have, that builds trust.
Yeah. And like empathy for their perspective. I feel like from the parents' standpoint, if they didn't grow up with the wealth, some of them did, but if they didn't grow up with the wealth, just like it's the kids' first time hearing about some of this stuff, it's also the parents' first time delivering some of these messages. So how could you be good at it? Of course, it is going to be a little uncomfortable. Do you encourage parents to like read certain books or if they come to you early in the process and then maybe that trust reveal isn't going to be for a decade or something,
Mhm.
how are you getting them ready as a firm, or are you not thinking about it in that way?
No, we are. We have a library of books and white papers and material that we encourage families to read when they're interested. But really, it's just many, many conversations with the advisors.
Yeah.
But in the way that we have the conversations with families, so we've already started implementing communication tools and we've had communication retreats with the older generation from the moment they become clients that matter.
Got it.
So we're building those tools and kind of creating that foundation that we will continue to build on for a number of years. These conversations are rarely just a one and done. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it happens over time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's jump into some scenarios that I think will be very common for advisors and that advisors have heard from their clients if they're involved in this type of work. The first one that is probably the most common that we hear, it is a little wealth 2.0, but it's still a reality to me, is like, I don't want to tell my kids anything. What say you on, if you're giving advice to an advisor who's managing, let's just do a $5 or $10 million client. What would you say to them? Because they don't want to upset their client.
Mhm.
They don't want to tell them they're wrong. All those other little voices in your head. So what would you say?
I would encourage that advisor to also have a growth mindset and to be curious. So ask their client a lot of questions. God, that seems to be a really strong feeling. Tell me why you think that. Tell me why that's your feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe ask them, what has your experience been with this? Usually people who have really strong feelings about that, it comes out of some kind of experience.
Yeah.
And they could say, well, I've seen other people, or I don't want my kids to lose their motivation, or, I didn't come from wealth and I want my kids to, have the same struggles and learn the same lessons that I learned. It could be a host of things, but you can't know how to respond if you don't know where the feeling and sentiment is coming from.
Yeah. How far would you take it if you were an advisor? I feel like you and I both think that this would not be a good approach. I'm going to tell my kids nothing. Just one day I'm not going to be here and things are going to happen, whether they get the money, they don't get the money, it's going somewhere else, whatever. If a client is dead set on it, is there a fiduciary responsibility of an advisor to say, I just need to give you the disclaimer that all of the data shows this approach is not the right one? How far would you take it if you were an advisor?
Everybody can choose as transparent or non-transparent as they want.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best thing that you can say is we work with a lot of families and we have collected a lot of data, both within our firm and within our industry, that shows that that's a costly mistake.
Yeah. All right. Scenario number 2. I thought of one that I didn't tell you in advance. So I'm gonna do that one now.
Oh,
You made me think of it when you were talking about the families coming to you very early in this process and saying like, we want to leave money to the kids. What if they're just not sure what they want to do? So that they maybe they have some wealth. Again, I like the $5-10 million example here, but like they're just like, I don't know. My kids are doing all right. Maybe we want to donate it. We're not really sure. How do before you start documenting and creating trust and doing things, how do you help people think through this problem when they really aren't sure what the answer is?
I think you begin with having the conversation with the couple. And again, ask lots of questions and be curious. What are the opportunities of giving it all to your kids? What are the opportunities of giving it to charity? What do you think? And also, what do you think your kids would want?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe give them the opportunity and the option to bring their kids into the conversation instead of assuming what they think is best for their kids. Ask them.
Right. Ask the kids.
Ask the kids.
So bring everyone in and say, we're not really sure what we want to do here, and we would love your thoughts.
Right. So, like, here's an example of a family where they had a beloved vacation home, like a ranch. The couple spent so much time thinking about how to preserve this ranch for the next generation. They put it into a trust. They created an endowment. They wanted to think about how they had 4 kids, how the 4 kids were going to share it. The couple spent a lot of effort and a lot of money working with the state attorneys and other attorneys to create these entities and get it into place. When they finally went to share this with the kids, what the kids couldn't tell their parents, but what they told their advisor is they didn't really want it.
Yeah.
And like it was a great place. They all enjoyed it because it was the place where they could come and be with their parents. But none of them had any interest in operating it. They all live kind of other places in the country.
Right.
So had the parents asked the kids what they wanted, they would have known that they could have just put in their will or in their estate plan that the property would be sold and the proceeds would be distributed.
Right. Yeah. I think for us at Total Family, we always look for opportunities to zoom out where if a family is unsure or something like that, we might use that as a time to say, likely we've done values, purpose, and roles or priorities with them. But if we haven't, or if we haven't gone back to look at it in a while, I feel like that's a great time for an advisor to say, hey, let's bring this, kind of family culture material out, and let's look at that just to see is there anything in here that is going to help us make a decision like this, or that we feel really strong about in our decision. But I loved your example. So we touched on this next one, Luke, a little earlier, but when a family says you have the conversation, not us, obviously it's probably better if it comes from the family, but how do you push that back to them in a way that is respectful? And when you're having these conversations, let's just say, again, sub example, the family says, okay, fine, we'll do it. How do you decide who's in the room? When you think about your team, is it always at your office? Is it better done at an offsite? Is it less people from your team in there and it's more of an intimate family environment? How do you guys think about that? I know there was like 7 questions in
Yeah,
there, but
okay. So I'll try to hit all of those. Where we think about who is in the room, it really just it's very simple. Like if there are going to be 3 family members, if it's a mom, dad, and a child, we don't want 4 of us in the room. That makes no sense. Like it's
Sure, yeah, yeah.
overwhelming. So if there's 3 family members, there's no more than 2 of us. And it's generally going to be, so every one of our families has a 5-person family team. It's generally going to be the leader of that, whether it's the partner or the director, and then the culture and learning lead, whether that would be myself or Courtney Pullen. So 2 of us to three family members.
Okay.
If it's a big family, group, there might be three or four of us, but that's not as frequent. When the parents come to us and say, you do it,
Yep.
we say, we could do that. But this is one of those opportunities that comes around a few times in a life. Your kids will always remember this conversation if it is with you.
Mm-hmm.
This will be one of those times that they look back on for decades. They will not forget it. And if done rightly, it brings you all together and it creates something that we could never deliver on our own.
Does that work? Is there ever a time where they're like, yeah, all sounds good, Luke. We just want you and Courtney to do it.
It hasn't happened yet, but what I will always say is I will be right there with you. I'll be
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
room. And I think a lot of times people want, like, they want their trusted advisor. They want
of course. Yeah.
a coach in the room that, and then in those conversations, you can, if they've forgotten something, you can kind of gently bring it up. And this reminds me of something you said to me that I think they would love to hear.
Yeah.
But you want to make it as informal and comfortable as possible. And then around the setting, it really depends. We encourage families to do this in a place that's comfortable. Sometimes they say that is our conference room in our office,
Right.
and that is a-okay. And sometimes it's at their home. It could be anywhere.
And leading up to it, is it like, come in, we have to have a meeting about something? You know, how are you setting the stage for something like that? So people, do you want them to know things walking into the meeting? Do you want them to be totally caught off guard? Like, how do you think about that?
I think the transparency needs to begin early.
Sure. Okay. I like
So to
that.
say, you're going to be home for the summer after graduation or whatever this is, on June 14th, we're meeting, and here's the purpose.
Yeah. We're going to talk about some, confidential, big family topics and so they're not going in blind.
Right. But also going back to what I said a few minutes ago, when we begin this process, we're also asking the kids what they need from their parents.
Right.
So that's already an opportunity where they know some kind of new collaboration is coming.
Okay. All right. I like that. Last scenario for you is a family feeling like they waited too long. Our kids are older now. We're not really sure what to do. The ship has sailed in terms of our communication. We hadn't been working with matter for 2 decades, so we didn't get the learning and all the stuff. And now I'm sitting here with a bunch of assets that we don't know what to do with. We're not all that kind of stuff. What would you tell a wealth advisor that feels like their family waited too long?
Yeah, it's never too late. The only time it is too late is when you've died. It is the estate attorney sharing these details with the kids.
Yeah.
And the tragedy of that is that this always brings up questions that they can never get answers to because the person, if you feel like you've waited too long, you haven't. And there's always connection to be made.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think there's like the decision of what you're doing. And I like to push the families to talk about the why behind the decision. It's not like you owe it to them, but when you're talking to that estate attorney and that person's not there and they're like, why did they do it this way? If you don't have a good answer to that, then that stinks. Because the why could sometimes explain things in a different way. Luke grew up in this certain way. This happened to Luke throughout his life, and it changed how he thought about all these things. Doesn't mean they're still going to agree with how everything played out, but I think the why behind some of these decisions is many times missing. Is there a way that is captured in your process? Like, when you're doing these trusts, is the why captured?
Yeah. So kind of zooming out to the way we work with families that matter, we have a process around onboarding a new client.
Mm-hmm.
We call it the intentional path.
Okay.
And with every new client, we're doing all the technical stuff, learning everything about, their financial world. But in the first 6 months, we always have the clients participate in a half-day communication workshop. Some client families already communicate really well, where we just say, we're giving you one extra arrow in your quiver.
Yeah.
And some come to us because they need to communicate better. But we begin with a communication workshop where we give families tools to learn how to communicate effectively. And then about 3 months after that, we have another full day family meeting where families kind of codify their family values, guiding principles, purpose of their wealth, 3 to 5 year strategic plan.
Okay.
So in every future meeting book, whether it's a quarterly financial meeting, whether we're going over estate planning, anything else, the advisors always begin with revisiting the values and purpose statement that the family's made.
Yeah.
So then every future conversation or anything that we're doing with the family, whether it's around the financial wealth or the human capital, stems from those values.
Yeah, I love that. Our vision is values, purpose, roles when we do it. I love hearing you say that if you start every meeting with it. Sometimes advisors will say, when should I use this? And it's like every meeting. Sometimes you'll spend 10 seconds on it. Sometimes you'll spend the entire meeting on that one page, right? But just using that as a starting point to orient the family, I think is so powerful. So I love that. I love that you're doing it.
Interject with a funny story. Even for families that say they want to do this, they say they do, and then you work to try to schedule the meeting.
Yeah, of
And
course.
they get hesitant. They're like, I don't know if I really want to do it.
You and I
And
probably are living that same, we've both experienced that in spades.
yes, I bet. So we have a client, and they've been clients for a long time, and their advisor's been really encouraging them for years to have this values meeting. They didn't do it forever, and finally they said, okay, we're in. And we scheduled it for, like June 10th or whatever last year. So June 10th comes around, the couple comes in, and husband and wife, husband runs the company. Wife gets here early. The husband is like 25 minutes late, walks in and sits down. And the first thing he says is, just so we're clear, I really don't want to do this. Like I really don't want to be here. And it was also like a beautiful day. It was like, could be outside playing golf.
Sure.
We said, okay, that's fine.
Great starting point.
Great starting point. So let's say the meeting starts at like 10 a.m. I just begin by asking them stories about their family. Like, just tell me about your family. Like, tell me about the company. And it turned into this like hour and a half of the two of them just talking and telling the most phenomenal stories. Story for him about being a kid growing up in this family, going to work with his grandfather and his dad, going through struggles, times where they thought the company was going to collapse, times where it was like, hitting home runs. And then we broke for lunch before we started putting these values together. And an hour and a half or so into this, when we stopped for lunch, he paused and said, okay, I just want to let you know I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like, this is great.
Yeah.
So what I'd say to advisors, sometimes you have to be really persistent.
Right.
And just keep encouraging families to get into this. And the thing that happened with this family is that not only did they have this meeting, it went so well that then within the next 12 months, where we had normally just had one family meeting scheduled every 12 months, like suddenly they were adding three.
Yeah.
Then they wanted us to talk with their kids. They wanted to come up with plans for other things. Like it started to grow.
I love that. And like, I think it's also like meeting people where they are too. The some of the family dynamics work, I think everyone, it could be associated like it's going to be therapy and everyone's crying. But when you're talking, at least for us, when we're talking to these executives, if they're hesitant, going down the path that you went, where you're saying, what do you know about hard work? What do you know about being a good leader? What do you know about treating people in your organization right? What do you know about being a dad? They will have answers for you in the areas that they're comfortable, and that will many times inform their value system. It's just like getting through the initial, it's like a workout kind of, right? Like you're just like, I don't want to get up right now. I don't want to go for a run or whatever. But then when you're done, you're feeling this like release of energy in a way. Luke, thank you so much for coming on Visionary Advisor. People probably don't get exposure to firms like Matter very often. And so really appreciate it. where can everyone find your white paper? Is there anything that you want to sort of like plug or direct people to that are just interested in learning about you or matter as a whole?
I would say the best place to go is our website. It's matterfamilyoffice.com. You'll find a tab on the homepage to Insights and the white paper and a number of other articles from multiple members of our team are there.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that in the notes too. That is all we have for you today, visionary advisors. Until next time, remember the future of wealth starts with you.